Hello, my name is Tim Wilmot and welcome to my watercolor demo of a rural scene. And in this one, this will be an exercise in how to change things you see to suit the composition. Now also in this watercolor I'll be covering a few techniques like laying down a wash, wet in wet, blending different colors in your palette, bit of negative painting. We're going to be painting around those bales of straw there. I'll introduce a person as well, and we'll cover dry brush strokes. I'll also be going through the normal stages I go through in a painting and covering such things as timing. Now those of you who've seen my previous YouTube demos will know that I paint in a loose style or impressionistic style, and this is very suitable for using that style for a scene like this, a nice rural scene. This is actually in southwest France, but it could be anywhere in the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. Typical rural scene, a summer scene with those straw bales there. And this has a lot of similarities with some of the street scenes I've done. I've done quite a few paintings of car parks with the rooftops of cars in high contrast with a darker background. This is exactly the same with these straw bales. I mean, it's the same principle. So when I look at a scene like this, what I think about is what to leave out, what can I change, what's going to be my focal point, what's going to be the darkest part of the painting. Well, it looks like to me the base of that tree, that wispy tree on the left hand side, the far hedgerow is quite dark at the base there. That'd be quite nice to have that contrasting against the straw bales. That'd be one of the lighter parts of the painting. And that road looks pretty boring to me. I might introduce a slight curve to it. Obviously things like fence posts, they're very open to those being changed as well. As I say, I'll introduce a figure into the scene on the right hand side. Might be a nice balance with the tree there. So let's get started then. Now the paper I'm using in this demo is Saunders Waterford, very good watercolor paper. It's 300 grams in weight. It's a medium texture, not N-O-T, and it's secured on a piece of board with some masking tape. I'm often asked, do you ever stretch your paper initially? No, I don't. I find that, well, I'm not using a massive piece of paper here. This is quarter imperial. This is 15 inches across, 15 inches by 11 inches. So it will buckle a little bit, but it not so much that it's going to bother you. So I'm doing my outline sketch. I've got there the reference photo top right corner, just to give you a bit more information as I'm going through this. And I'm making my outline sketch with a 3B pencil, quite a soft pencil. You could use 2B, 3B, 4B, as long as you can. I think as long as you can see those pencil lines with, as you lay down your washes, you can still see the reference lines there. Now, so I started with the background, hedgerows, then I got in this curved road, and now these straw bales, which will be a bit of a feature. And notice I'm making them a good bit larger than they are in the picture, in the photograph. So try and make a bit of a feature of those, and also have them up against the background, the dark background of that far hedgerow. So get one on the left hand side there as well. Then there's this rather nice shadow coming across the scene from left to right. It joins with that, the base of that tree, and then continues on across the road. That's quite nice as well. The tree is also quite a nice feature because it's connecting the foreground with the background as well. Just make these straw bales a little bit stronger. Just an indication of those shadows for the straw bales. And getting a fence post there. And then this foreground, which won't be too detailed, but I get in the fence post that again connect the foreground with that middle shadow going across. Another fence post. A few more. And those fence posts will also help with perspective and leading us into the composition. Now a figure. A lonely figure walking down the road. So with figures I start off with the head and then the shoulders, and then think, is this, because I'm doing it quite quickly, think then make a decision, is this figure walking away or towards us? I don't suppose it really matters which direction this figure is walking in. It's so far away. Some people say it's good to have figures walking in towards the middle of the composition rather than away from the middle of the composition, so it just helps that feeling of drawing things into the picture. Just make that base of the hedgerow a little stronger. And we're going to have some shadows going across the road, of course, the shadows of the fence posts. So I think we're almost done now with the initial drawing. Don't think that needs anything more to it. It's just an outline, just a guideline for our painting. So if I could just run through the colours I'm using in my palette. From the top I've got a neutral tint, then second one down is burnt umber, then burnt sienna, yellow ochre, which is what I'm using now for the horizon. Below that is viridian green, not often used. Then there's a cerulean blue, a cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, then a cadmium red or a bright red, a light red, sort of a browny red, cadmium orange, and a bright yellow, which I think is cadmium yellow. So I've started here with that yellow ochre band across the painting. My board's on a slight angle, so the wash will travel down a little bit, and in at the top with a bit of a mixture really of cerulean blue and cobalt blue, a bit stronger at the top where the sky is more intense. And what's happening is that the two are gradually mixing together over the next few minutes. Now the brush I'm using here is a mop brush. It's a synthetic mop brush from a company called Raphael, which is a French maker. It's actually quite good quality. It does have a very good retention of water and a very good edge to it as well. So this is the base now for the fields, and could be the actual colour for those straw bales as well. The road is a cool wash. And at this point it doesn't really matter that the field is the wash on the field is sort of mixing with the road wash. That doesn't really matter. That'll become more defined when I lay down a second wash on top of this. So really in this first phase we're just getting down the base colours, but the sky, that won't be touched. You can see it's as we've been talking, or as I've been talking, it's gradually, the blue is gradually merged in with the yellow ochre. And this will be the base colour of the road as well. This won't be touched again. So I've added in, when I look at a road, I see all sorts of different tones and colours, reds, blues, purples, depending on what the composition, what the materials are they're using the road. But it's a bit cool, and as you can see, I'm constantly, while the paint is still moist, I'm constantly going back in there and adding a bit more colour to it. Just make it a bit more interesting, so it's not too monotonous. Now I've just speeded up things there. That first wash is now dry, and we can now go in with the background hedgerows. And you can see also as it's dried, it's gone a good bit lighter as well, which you've always got to think about when you're laying down a wash. If you think maybe it's too dark, don't worry about it. It's going to dry lighter. Now the brush I'm using here is an old mop brush that's actually, I think, sold normally to schools. It's quite a cheap brush, which I've hacked about a bit with a pair of nail scissors to give a jagged edge. Quite nice for foliage effects and trees and things like that. So I'm actually going to do this field, go over the field first, painting carefully around these straw bales. I've left out little bits here and there as well where there's lighter bits of vegetation, or the sunlight is catching mounds in the ground. So I'm making up this green with a bit of yellow ochre and cobalt turquoise, which actually I should have mentioned that when I went down the palette. After the viridian green, there's a cobalt turquoise in there, between the cerulean blue and the viridian green. That's a cobalt turquoise. Very good for doing reflections in water for a harbour scene, but also good for making a nice green with yellow ochre. And when you make up your own greens, you're going to get a lot of different variation in that green, which is very good for fields, trees. Make it a little bit darker now with the addition of some blue. And on this side, this is in part shade, so that's why I've made that a little bit darker. Now the grass verge on the right hand side, same brush. Just paint around those fence posts, bit of negative painting. So actually this brush could be almost used for the whole painting. It's quite adaptable to different techniques, but I prefer, as I say, using it for foliage and trees, hedgerows. Gives you a kind of, because it's got that jagged edge to it, it gives you a sort of random effect. So the field on the left hand side is still damp, and going in again with a few dabs of that same wash, which will give us a little bit of a cauliflower effect, which doesn't matter on this field. It'll enhance hopefully the feeling of some pasture land. Right, we'll just let this dry a bit. And then we can make a start on the background hedgerow, which is going to be darker in tone, and because it's in the distance, I'm adding in a bit of blue to the mix. Same brush as we used before, and probably the paint's a little bit thicker as well, not so watery. So starting on the left hand side. Now I could have done this hedgerow while the sky was a little bit damp to give a softer edge to it. That can sometimes give you a nice feeling of a hazy sunshine. Use the side of the brush as well, which, having rough paper, gives you another different effect. Really, this is the background, so it's just going to be very simple. So it's starting off light at the top of that hedgerow, but I want to get quite darker towards the base. And so I'm using the neutral tint now, that top colour, but mixed it with a little bit of cobalt turquoise rather than having it neat. Adding it to a colour. And like we had with the sky, when I did the sky, the yellow ochre with blue. These two colours are now mixing with each other. Paint around those straw bales. This is the main one, which is almost a focal point on its own. Continue over, dab a few little bits of darker paint into the area above the base of that hedgerow. And of course all these straw bales, they're different sizes, and again, like the fence posts, they're helping with the idea of perspective and the depth of the field. Sometimes I do use my fingertips just to blend in colours or smudge things a little bit. Now paint around the figure. Doesn't matter if you go over the person's head or indeed the body. You can go in with some thicker paint to rectify that for the body. So I've been smudging that from top left to bottom right, which is where the sun's coming from, so give a little bit of impression of some sun rays hitting that hedgerow. Now a line of shadows. Bit of ultramarine blue there. This is the main shadow now going across the middle of the picture, and we come to the base of this medium-sized tree. So let's actually get this tree in now. So same brush. And you can see that the end has been splayed out. So it does help you get that effect of foliage. Mixing in different shades of green here. Try not to make it too symmetrical. Not many trees are symmetrical. Now for the branches, I'm going to use a slightly different brush. This is a sword brush or dagger brush, and aptly named because it looks like a knife or a dagger, but very good. It's got a very good point, and similar to using a rigger brush, but excellent for creating branches, twigs. Here I'm going quite dark at the base with that neutral tint again, added with some other colours, so it's not pure neutral tint. And also what's happening is the base of this tree, the dark right hand side, is merging in with that dark hedgerow in the background. This dagger brush is also very good for doing random leaf shapes. If you've got sometimes over some of my paintings, I've got in the foreground in the top left corner or the top right corner, maybe to help with the framing of the picture, some canopy of leaves that are maybe above us, and again that brush is very good for doing that. Must remember to try not to overdo it. So back with my foliage brush now, if I can call it that. And we'll continue on with this dark shadow going across the middle. Just left out a few gaps there where the fence posts are coming up the picture. And then to the roadside. And across the road. I could have used a different brush for this, but as I've got this one, could have used a small mop brush or a synthetic brush to do that shadow across the road. And then up the grass verge on the right hand side. And this helps with the definition of the road as well, when you've got shadows going across from a field on the left hand side, then the road, and then up the right hand side. Just helps to give some kind of definition to the road surface and the fact that the grass verge is rising above it. So some foliage on the right hand side. Bit of burnt sienna. And try not to go over those fence posts. So it's time now to do the figure, and I'll start with the face. So I've got a small synthetic brush here, and I mixed up a bit of skin tone. Well, you could see I was just a bit of orange, a bit of light red, bit of red, and getting the face and arms. Now for the body, we'll go darker here. I could have left this figure maybe slightly highlighted. I could have painted around it like the straw bales. Not sure whether this is dark enough, but we'll see. Loosely draw in the torso, indication of a couple of legs, join it with that shadow, so now for some shadow for the straw bales. And the shadow underneath the straw bales is just similar to how I would do a car, with a bit of wash on the body of the car, come down to the bottom, it's still damp, and then I go in with a darker colour for the shadow, and they merge together. Gives you a softer feel. Paying a bit more attention to that main straw bale there, because it is sort of a focal point along with the figure. So some fence posts, again with this smaller synthetic brush. Back with my foliage brush now for the foreground. And this should really help transform this, which was looking a bit boring. Join those fence posts together. Good bit darker at the base. After this we'll get in some shadows across the road. Just add a bit more water in there. Bit of splattering as well in the foreground. This will dry a little bit lighter. Now just add a bit of detail to the right hand side with that foliage brush. And use another fence post. So just quickly add that in there. It's almost a dry brush stroke, that fairly thick paint on a small synthetic brush. Just spotted a bit more detail than is on the tree there with the twigs. Back with the dagger brush. And then some wire between the posts, which this brush is very good for doing that, or it could be, you could use a rigger brush as well. And then try and give the effect of the straw with this same brush, adding in a few lines there. This straw is wrapped around in a circular motion, so adding in a few concentric circles there. And while I've got this brush, just add in little bits here and there. Maybe some longer blades of grass or some wildflowers. And a bit of wire, which again will help the lead the eye into the composition. Now, few tire marks on the road with a dry brush. Not too much. Just a few lines too. It could be tire marks, that sort of thing. I'll just dry things off now. I do sometimes use a hairdryer just to speed things up, particularly if I'm working if I'm doing a demonstration or a workshop. I'll very often use a hairdryer there to speed things up. So we're nearing the final phases of this painting now. And what I very often do at the end is add in a few highlights with some white gouache. So here with this, again with the dagger brush, going over that darker base of the tree, it does really help transform a painting, adding in those whites, those highlights, generally with a smaller brush. And it's almost neat out of the tube as well. And I've got a really small brush now doing the top of this figure, top of the head, and then quickly the shoulders, more on the left hand side, less on the right hand side because the sun's coming from the left. And while we've got this brush, maybe the tops of some of the posts, the sides, particularly where it's up against a dark background. Left hand side of those left hand posts. So I think we're nearly done now. So what I'll do now is I'll just show the final picture. So just to summarize, we've got a rural scene. From a photograph, we've considered it, looked at it, think what can we change, what will be the focal point, and we changed a few things. We made the road, a straight, boring road, into a bit of a sweeping curve. We made the straw bales a little bit larger. We made sure that they were against the darker background, give a bit of contrast, always works well with watercolor. And the fence posts were changed a little bit. So hopefully you like that. You can see more of my paintings up on my website, timwilmot.com. Please contact me if you want any more information about demos or workshops that I do, or any paintings you may like to purchase. But thanks for watching, and hopefully catch up with you next time. Thank you.